that use the utensils, take them, wash them with water, and what did we say about grease? With Dawn, I'm getting 99% off. With water, how much of am I getting off? I get off a majority of it, but I'm not going to get off all of it. And not just that, by agreement, mushrik meat, mushrik slaughter, what is the ruling? If I have a Hindu who sacrifices a cow, can I eat that cow? No, absolutely not. And what is the ruling on that meat? It is haram. It is najis. It's impure. And that is the meat that the mushrik Arabs were eating. And the Prophet ﷺ said, yeah, you can use their utensils, but you have to wash it. Meaning, do the best you can in removing it. But what's going to happen? There's going to be remnants, and there's going to be some film that stays. And why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do this? Why did the Prophet ﷺ teach in this way? Because he wanted to teach us there is a tolerance. There's no zero tolerance in the Sharia. It's impossible. You know why? Because it's impossible to live like that. Absolutely impossible. There have to be tolerances for things. So this not only applies to purity, not only just to worship, even to certain transactions. Is it possible to have a zero tolerance policy when we go and do business in the world today? Impossible. I have to have some tolerance. Now, where do you set that tolerance, right? That's a discussion I'm willing to have. Should it be 95? Should it be 90, 85, 80? What does that look like? That's okay. I'm fine with having that discussion. But it's definitely more than zero, right? It's definitely more than zero. And this is how Islam is. Islam has never been a zero tolerance religion. There has to be some element of tolerance. Otherwise, there's no way for us to deal with each other. There's no way to navigate life. There's no way to navigate transactions. There's no way to navigate worship. Did I pray 3 rak'ah? Did I pray 4 rak'ah? Like, did I pray dhuhr? Right, this doubt that can actually overtake and consume a person is one of the things that can happen here when we try to overcorrect. When we constantly give value and give credence to some of these thoughts. The other side, it's working. What's going on? Okay. To focus on dhikr. So if a person is just constantly making dhikr and not worried about whether the shaitan is going to do waswas or what, it's like, no, you know what, I'm working, I'm doing my thing. Eventually what can happen? So he says here that his heart will be consumed by the remembrance of shaitan. And we had touched on this last time. What does he mean here? Riya. Ahsant. Good. That if a person is just making dhikr for the sake of making dhikr, eventually what's going to happen? Riya is going to enter his actions, because we always, as human beings, need to be motivated and we need to be pushed to do things. We're always going to have something that pushes us to work. And that push can be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it can be spiritual, or it can be worldly. And what is the benefit of me doing dhikr in front of people? People, what will they think about me? It's like, he's so pious. And because he's pious, I want to help him. I want to take him out to eat. I want to support him. I want to do X, Y, Z, right? So there is a worldly benefit in these things, because people will start thinking and assuming things about me. And that is what the danger of riya is. So the truth concerning this is that an individual always has to be vigilant, and we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in parallel, right? These things can always move hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. So Imam Ghazāli, he closes this chapter into the section saying that when one sleeps and they have a task in the morning, they keep in mind the task they must wake for, so they might awaken a few times during the night. So what do you guys think about that example? What is he saying here? And why did he bring this example? Huh? It's very true. Right? If I know I have an interview in the morning, what's going to happen? Right? I'm going to have like 10 alarms, right? Or if I have to meet someone, if I have to go somewhere, if I have to catch a flight, right? There's so many efforts that we'll make. And how relaxing will that sleep be? Right? It's not going to be very relaxing. And he's basically saying the same thing about living our life in this world, that we should never be too relaxed. We should never be too comfortable. Because getting too comfortable and too relaxed, we create a very easy pathway for shaitan to enter our nafs and to start tainting our deeds. Second example. He says the example of the heart is like a well intended to be purified from dirty water so that pure water can gush from it. So this is like if you have water, right, and you have a filter that's attached to it. What is the purpose of the filter? Right, to take out the impurities. So he says here that the one preoccupied with the remembrance of shaitan, he'll leave the dirty water in. Like he becomes so obsessed with where the water is coming from, instead of actually doing something to purify it, he's so obsessed with where the water is coming from. What kind of water is coming in if you just keep focusing like that? It's dirty water, right? Because you're not doing anything to actually filter it. And he says the one who combines between the remembrance of shaitan and the remembrance of Allah has removed the dirty water from one side but left it flowing from the other, prolonging their efforts, and the well does not dry from the dirty water. And he says the last one. The insightful one is the one who blocks the path of dirty water and fills it with pure water. So when the dirty water comes, they repel it with a cork and a barrier without any effort or struggle, burden, or extra exhaustion. So basically what he's saying here is that in order for us to clean this vessel, that is our heart, what do we need to do? What is the strategy that he's suggesting with this example? Say. Sure. So he's using the example here of how to make a clean well, right? So if we use this example to mean the heart, how do I create a clean heart? Okay, first by actually taking out all the filth. And what is some of the filth I want to remove from this well? Sins is one. What else? Riya, like jealousy, showing off, anger, backbiting, arrogance. Because once I remove those, what can I replace it with? I'm sorry? With good habits, with good deeds. I can replace it with courage. I can replace it with piety. Right? I can replace it with patience. I could replace it with like servitude. Like there's so many things. Because once the vessel is clean, it's so much easier to keep it clean, right? Because you can see through it. And that's how the heart is. You know, and subhanAllah, the heart, it really is an amazing container that it's so easy to pour good things into our hearts. And even the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he describes the heart as a vessel. And he says that basically the heart is like a clear vessel. And whatever I put into it, what happens? Right? It will take the color of whatever I pour into that heart. So if I put pure things into that heart, what color will the heart take? It'll take a pure color. And if I put impurities into the heart, then it's going to take on that impure color. So we constantly need to strive to make sure and understand, right, what are some of the things that I need to do to keep my heart pure, to keep my heart clean. And if we understand that things like jealousy and hatred and anger and backbiting, right, and love of status and showing off, these are things that we're constantly looking to keep out. Because once our heart is clean, it's easy to push all these other things away. And this is, you know why? Because we said the heart is like our mirror, right? It's our spiritual mirror. When we look into that spiritual mirror, it should be, every time I look into it, what should I be seeing? I should see myself. Every time that I look into it, because the moment there's a blemish, what can I do? I can fix it. It's the same thing, right? It's the same thing with the physical mirror, right? The physical mirror, when I look into it, I wake up, I might have like a little bit of drool on my face, right? Or like I might have a blemish or something. It becomes that much easier to clean. And the spiritual heart is the same way. The spiritual mirror that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. In the moment how do I know that this is starting to get dirty and foggy? What do I start seeing? I'm sorry? Okay. But what am I going to see? I'm going to see something instead, right? So when a physical mirror becomes foggy, I can't see anything. The mirror is useless. Yeah? So the spiritual mirror, how do I, and I know when it becomes like the physical mirror, I know when it's useless. Why? When I can't see my reflection anymore. The spiritual mirror, how do I know it's getting foggy and it's getting dirty? Okay, I definitely, I can't see myself, but who can I see now? Huh? The shaitan. I start looking at others, right? Because it's no longer looking at me. Well, guess where it's looking at? It's looking at other people. Oh, look at how he's praying. Look at how he's standing. Look at how she's dressed. Look at them going at this place. Oh, the people who do this are like that, and the people who do this. All of a sudden, guess who the only person I'm not talking about? I'm not talking about myself anymore. And what does the shaitan want me to do? He wants me to be distracted. He doesn't want me to focus on myself. He doesn't want me to better myself. And we'll find that the source of bettering our relationship isn't the focus on fixing the people around us. And if I try to do that, how successful am I going to be? I'm not I could be successful at all, right? It's kind of like worrying about other people's health. Like, you know, have you met those people? Like, you know, they're constantly worried about, oh, you know, you shouldn't eat this, and you shouldn't do that, and you should do this, and you should do that, right? So what happens? Like, if I have that person who's constantly telling me what to eat and how to, you know, how to think and how to work and how to exercise, what do I do with that person? I just avoid them. That's all I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna avoid that person. Be like, you know, I'm good. I don't need to hear all this. Because reality is it's not possible to worry about someone's health more than they worry about their own. Right? You just can't. That's not a realistic and it's arrogant for me to think that. And it's the same thing with spirituality. I can never worry about someone else's spirituality more than they can worry about theirs. Can I help? Absolutely. When should I help? When they ask. Simple. Right? It's not that difficult. And if I feel that person is shy to ask, what can I do? Right? I need to build a relationship, that's for sure. No doubt. Okay, I built a relationship, now what? How do I throw it out there? I'm sorry? Ask. Same thing. It's like, hey, I noticed such and such. Is it okay if I, right? And that's it. That's all it takes. And many times, because the moment I receive permission, what can I do? I can walk through the door. But if I don't have permission, what happens? The door is just going to get, right? It's going to get slammed in my face. SubhanAllah, I get so many calls like, oh, hey, can you talk to my wife? Or, hey, can you talk to my son? Or can you talk to my husband? Or can you talk to my father? My answer is always like, sure, I have no problem doing that. But I also don't have a problem getting the phone slammed in my face. Why? Because the moment I intrude on someone else, what can they do? I didn't ask to talk to you. I don't care who you are, right? Because I didn't seek permission. But if someone makes an appointment with me, what happens? It becomes a lot easier because they're the ones that open that door. So learning how to deal with people and how to engage with them, like all it is questions. That's it. And the questions can be one of two ways, right? I can ask that person the question or the person can ask me the question. This is the easiest way to engage with people. This is the easiest way to give advice. It's the easiest way to be non-confrontational. But me coming up and walking up to someone and be like, hey, you need to da-da-da-da-da, or you need to understand da-da-da. What are the chances of him listening to that? Zero. It's like a 0% chance. And not just that, what is pushing me to speak to him in this way? It's my own arrogance, subhanAllah. Like, it's my own arrogance. Why? You need to listen to me. Why? Because my opinion is so important. Right? I'm right. You need to listen to me. It's so sad. It's so sad how many of us fall into this and how, from all the shaitan had to do was a whisper. Man, that's a really good idea. How come they're not listening to you? We really need to listen to what you have to say because what you have to say is so important. What I have to say is like the most important thing in the world, right? Allah musta'an. Look how the shaitan tricks us. And look how he takes advantage of us. And we think we're doing good, right? No, well, the Prophet ﷺ, he told me to command the good and forbid the evil, right? He told me that this is what I have to do. Do I know for sure that what I'm doing is commanding the good and forbidding the evil? And even if I am, is this the way the Prophet ﷺ told me to do that? Did he ﷺ do it like that? No. So what gives me the right? Do I have have I been given a higher status or authority or position than the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That he didn't do it and I'm going to be the one to. It's like, no, he missed that one. A'udhu billah, hasha. And if we talk about the prophetic model, we talk about the prophetic lifestyle, we talk about prophetic engagement, we talk about prophetic relationships. Look at how he engaged. Look at how he dealt with people. Is this how he won people's hearts? If we want to win people's hearts, then we need to engage in the way that he did, by showing care, by showing love, by asking questions, by showing humility. SubhanAllah, I had a young man, he came up to me, he was like, he had gotten into a fight with someone else. He's like, should I apologize? He's like, I spoke to him, but should I apologize? And I was like, you will never lose by apologizing, even if you're apologizing again. Because it's a sign of humility. And learning how to be humble and learning how to apologize, that is the prophetic model. It's amazing, hadith Sunan Abi Dawud, where a companion came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, when you were hitting your animal to make it go faster, you hit me. And I want revenge. I want to seek my revenge. So he said something, he said, okay. He said, what do you want me to do? He said, well, I wasn't wearing my upper garment at the time. I said, okay, no problem. He took off his upper garment. He's like, huh, what? What else would you like me to do? He's like, nothing. He just gave him a hug. He's like, I just wanted to embrace you, Ya Rasulullah. But I'm saying, subhanAllah, the lesson in that for me is, man, it's not just the fact that, oh, I'm sorry, right? That wasn't it. How would you like me to apologize? Right? And actually showing the humility and be like, okay, well, what is it that you need me to do for you to feel better? Now, they might ask me for something like silly, but I don't have to do everything that person asks. If a person says like, okay, yeah, I want you to kiss my feet. I was like, no, I don't want to kiss your feet. Like, there are things that I'm willing to engage in, and there's things that I'm willing to do. I don't want to do that. Is there anything else I can do? And sometimes you might get to a negotiation point where you're like, okay, I guess there's no resolution. And that's fine too. You know why? Because I made the effort to humble myself. And once I made the effort to humble myself, that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expected from me. And if the other person is asking for too much, then they're asking for too much. I'm not accountable for that. I'm accountable for my actions, and I'm accountable for my efforts. So, are there situations and cases where I can show off? I don't want to use the word show off, but are there situations where I can show my actions publicly? Do you think that there are exceptions? Where I should publicly do a deed? Sure. What are some situations that you guys can think of off the top of your head? Yeah. Okay. So what would be the purpose there? Okay, to teach, right? So I think we can expand that to all teaching situations. So if there's an opportunity for me to teach someone something, I should do it publicly. So, right, I can't go and do it privately in my room, right? that person's not going to learn. So teaching is a good space. What else? Giving dawah. Okay, I mean that's teaching too. What else? Is that the only time? Just to teach? Huh? To motivate other people. Beautiful, right? That's excellent. And these are just a couple examples we can think off the top of our head. Inshallah, we'll talk about more. In general, when it comes to actions and deeds, it's usually better to do deeds in public or in private. In private, usually, right? That's the go-to. If I doubt, like, hey, should I do this in public and private? I should probably lean more toward doing it privately. Why? Riyā, right? So I don't fall into riyā, right? That's one of the reasons that I want to avoid that. So if I know, they're always keeping in mind that there's a danger of riyā when it comes to actions. It will always allow us to err on the side of caution and to try to make sure that we're doing as many of our deeds privately as possible. Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, he said, Muslims have come to know that secrecy safeguards both acts, but there's also benefit in public display. So he says the same thing, right? It's good to do things in secret, but there are situations where you can do things in public. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised both secrecy and showing. In his statement, إِن تُبْدُوا الصَّدَقَاتِ فَنِعْمَا هِيَ وَإِن تُخْفُوهَا وَتُؤْتُوهَا الْفُقَرَاءَ فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. If you give charity openly, it's good. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how does he describe giving publicly and openly? He says it's good. If it was bad, they wouldn't have said that. They would have said it's bad. Don't do that. Only give it privately. But if you keep it secret and give it to the needy in private, then it is better. So you have good and you have better. But both of these fall into the sphere of good. So publicity can lead to a few things. Publicity can be in actions. It can be in speaking about those actions, right? So I can pray my sunan publicly, right? I can come to the masjid. I can pray in front of everyone. Or I can pray at home and I can come to the masjid and I can tell everyone how I pray my sunan at home, right? So this is one way. So he's talking about how does riyat manifest. The riyat can manifest in the action itself, or it can manifest in speaking about that action. So he uses the example of giving charity in public. There was an Ansari who used to give dates publicly, and the people followed him after seeing it. So sometimes when we see people giving, what happens? I feel encouraged, right? I feel motivated. I'm like, you know what? We get FOMO, right? Like we feel like, oh man, like I want to do that too. And there's nothing wrong with that feeling. That's a completely reasonable feeling. It's something that's completely healthy. Because remember, what do I have FOMO for? FOMO, oh, fear of missing out. I'm sorry. Yeah. I thought, isn't that like a Gen Z term? No? Oh, okay. Fine. I'm here to teach you, youngin. I got you. So if I see someone doing good and I have that fear of missing out and I give, should I stop myself or should I should carry out? Why? Right? Because what is it that I don't want to miss out on? Right, the good deed, right? There's the opportunity for the good deed is like, man, I want to take advantage of that opportunity. Will my reward be the same as the first person who did it? No, it won't. Who's going to get more reward? Right, the one who started it, right? The one who initiated it, he's definitely going to get more reward. But amthal fa amthal. Meaning, okay, yeah, the first person gets the most reward, and the second person, they get a little bit less, and the third, fourth, fifth, right? Like people who are following that example. And that's important to keep in mind. And how do we know this? Because there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, he asked, like, to the companions, do you ask for anything? Is there anything that you want? Ukasha ibn Muhsan, he stood up and he said, Ya Rasulullah, rifaqatak bil jannah. He said, I want to be with you in paradise. He said, that's all I want from you. He said, you want anything from me? He's like, yes, I want you to make dua that I have your companionship in paradise. So another companion, he stood up. He's like, me too. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, Sabakaka Ukasha. He says, Ukasha has preceded you. Sabakaka Ukasha. Sabakaka Ukasha. Sabak. Yani sabak shay. Yusbiqu. Before. Yani that meaning Ukasha got there before you. Yeah. Ukasha was the first one to do it. So in this here, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam is talking about like there are sometimes there are opportunities, right? You have to take advantage of them, and this is something that we should think about, right? When we're given opportunities, how quickly do we take advantage of them? Because sometimes, guess what happens with opportunities? The door closes. How many of us had an opportunity to buy Bitcoin when it was at like a few $100s? You know what I mean? Like. Sometimes those opportunities close. So what do? We take advantage of them as best as we can and as soon as we can. He uses another hadith. He says, whoever sets a good precedent in Islam will have the reward for that and the reward of those who act upon it. So basically, if I initiate something, right, I initiate a good deed or I initiate a good action, guess what happens to everybody that follows it? Right, I also, right? So this person, like if I'm like, hey, listen guys, we should start fasting Mondays, right? And I start it. And mashallah, people start fasting on Mondays. I get the reward for fasting. And then the person who heard it, they started fasting too. What happens? I get that reward too. And that person also what? Right, they get full reward. That person gets full reward for doing the action, and I get the reward for teaching that person or initiating that action. So these are always great opportunities for us to pass on these deeds and to acquire more good deeds. So he says that this applies to all acts, right? Those acts can be prayer. If I come to the masjid and people see me like doing my sunnah publicly, for example, and they feel inspired, they're like, man, you know what? I should start doing my sunnah too. Maybe I don't pray my sunnah. It's a good opportunity, right, to teach. And what can I do if I'm worried about showing off? What are some strategies that I can do? Yeah. Right? Maybe go pray in the back. Or do I have to pray in the musalla every time? No. Maybe sometimes I pray here and sometimes I'll go pray pray at home. So there are different things that we can do to protect our hearts from riyā. Question? Absolutely. So all of this is based off attention. There's no doubt about it. Is it possible that somebody regularly prays their sunnah in the masjid in front of everyone and they're completely unaffected? Absolutely. Right? There's no doubt about that. The only thing that we're saying is that it's important to be wary of our intentions and that, listen, yes, inshallah, I don't doubt that people's intentions are pure, but I myself, what should I do? I should do the best I can to protect my intention. And what is the easiest way to protect my intention? Doing it secret. Absolutely. It doesn't mean I have to do everything secretly, right? But if I have an opportunity to do something publicly or privately, I should always lean toward private. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to do things publicly, but I should definitely have a lean in that direction. So he's saying that this can apply to prayer, fasting, making hajj, jihad, other things. Even though where do we see this most? We see it most in charity, right? In giving charity. Like this is one of the more public things to do. Hajj is tough too. Why? Right? It's such a public action, right? Like Hajj, subhanallah, even the way we start Hajj is like labbaik Allahumma bi Hajj, right? Like I make a vocal proclaimment that I'm making Hajj. I'm wearing ihram, right? Everybody who sees me, they know I'm making Hajj. I'm walking around saying labbaik Allahumma labbaik, right? Like everybody knows that I'm Hajj. So Hajj is a tough one, right? Hajj is a tough one to because you just can't do it. You can't. There's nothing you could do to make it private. Like that is the idea behind Hajj is that it is a public action. It is a public show of devotion. It is a public show of worship. That is one of the goals and the purposes behind it. And that you see so many other people there. So here he gives the example of the mujahid, right? So you have this warrior. He's preparing to go for battle. He prepares his equipment. And the problem is that can I fight privately? Right? This is something, it's public, right? Engaging in warfare is a public action. This is something that happens publicly, and it's not something that can be hidden. But if I'm preparing for it, does this necessarily lead to riyā? No. It's the same thing if I'm preparing for Hajj. It is a public action that I'm doing, and I am preparing to do this publicly, but it is not necessary that it will actually lead to riyā. And he mentions this because there's a very famous hadith of the scholar, right, of the alim, the qari, and the mujahid. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. That these people, they will stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they said, Ya Allah, I became a scholar, I became an alim, because I wanted to worship you better. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he'll say to him, Kadab, you lied. And he'll be thrown by his face into the hellfire and saying that you were called, you became a scholar so that the people would call you a scholar. And the same thing is said about the Qari, and the Quran, and the Mujahid. And why these three jobs or positions specifically? Because of the spiritual reward that's tied to them. And in Islam, anything that has a very high reward, it also has a very high risk or punishment. It's a very double-edged sword. Nobody asked you to take this path. Nobody asked you to study the Quran. Nobody asked you to prepare to go and fight. Nobody asked you to go and study. These are decisions that you make on your own, and there are risks associated with those decisions. And it's very important to be cognizant, especially in these positions, to make sure that you do not fall into riyā. So he uses also an example that a person, he might make qiyam, but all of a sudden what's happening? He's praying like really loud. He's like, so it's, maybe his family hears him, right? Like, or his kids hear him, or like if he's in an apartment, like mashallah, man, 4B, dude, they he's praying all night. So it's important to be cognizant of these things. It's very important to be cognizant of these things because we said the major danger of riya is what? If I have riya in my prayer, if I have riya in giving money, if I have riya in reading Quran, what can happen? Well, sure, I'm doing it for the wrong reasons, absolutely. But what happens to those actions? They're null and void. All of the work that I put in, all of the effort that I put in, is completely gone, worthless. Right? Just like shirk removes any benefit that I could have in all of my actions, the riya works the same way within actions. So I can completely nullify an entire prayer just because I'm showing off, just because I have the wrong intention, or my reading of the Quran, or my giving in charity. Right? These are very dangerous things that we need to be aware of and to make sure that we're cognizant so that we're not falling into them. So he says that things that can be initiated publicly, like, so for example, congregational prayers, right? So Maghrib is going to be coming in about 10-15 minutes or so. Inshallah, we're all going to go and pray. It's a very public action. And to do that, we'll have to make wudu, right? Some of us might have to get dressed, to get ready to go to the masjid. There's a lot of initiation that happens, right? There's a lot of preparation that happens. And anything that requires preparation, we should at the same time, part of that preparation, be cognizant, be aware. And what is an easy way of being aware? What should I do? So if I'm making wudu, getting ready to go to the masjid, I'm putting my clothes on, maybe I put on some perfume. What else should I be doing? Check my intention. Simple as that. And how do I check my intention? What's a simple way of doing that? Just ask myself. That's it. And remind myself, hey, listen, why are you going to the masjid? Why are you going to pray? In this element, like, how often do we forget? Because we become creatures of habit, right? Something just becomes a habit. Or even to this class. Like, why did I come to this class today? When I was preparing to come here, what was my intention behind coming? Right? Sometimes we forget because it's just a habit. Or even myself, why am I teaching? Why am I preparing? What am I doing? And subhanAllah, I remember one of my students had asked me one time, and they're like, Sheikh, so it's like, constantly asking yourself, like, all of this, like, how do you deal with that, and like what? And I was like, Habibi, that's taqwa. I was like, that's exactly what taqwa is. And he was like, oh, right, you know what I mean? It was kind of like a light bulb moment for him. That's where taqwa actually comes in. Because every time we interact with people, every time we make sajda, every time we prepare, every time we speak to someone, just imagine if we stopped just for a moment, right? Just for a moment, and we stopped and we asked ourselves, why am I doing this? Or remember that you're doing this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Would we be as aggressive as we are? Like, would we be as mean as we are? Like, would we really act the way we did, like when we went to certain places or we dealt with certain people? Would I be doing the job in the way that I'm doing if I had that cognizance? And subhanAllah, how big a paradigm shift that creates in our hearts and our minds when we start learning to question ourselves. Like, not in a bad way, but just asking, like, hey, why am I, like, reminding myself, like, why am I doing this? Like, who am I doing this for? Who's benefiting from this? Because sometimes we fool ourselves when we're coming to prayer. Sometimes we'll rush, right, to get here. Sometimes we'll cut people off. Sometimes we'll do all of these other things. Like, who's benefiting from my prayer? By me coming and praying here, who's benefiting? Like, it's just me, right? I'm benefiting. Am I benefiting other people with my prayer? Like, can I come to Dar al-Hijrah? It's like, don't worry, guys, I'm here. Yeah, you are blessed with my prayer. Yes. Sure. No, you don't have. No, you don't have to. Why? You do not have to tell anyone. If I want to do a good deed on behalf of my parents, on behalf of my siblings, on behalf of my friends, on behalf of my children, SubhanAllah, I remember I was sitting here during one of the fundraisers, and there was a brother. He had a list of his kids, and he would donate on behalf of his kids. And I was like, yeah. I ran into one of the sons, and I was like, hey man, your dad was like his. He's like, he was. Like, I had no idea. So I think that's actually a way of protecting our intention by not telling other people, because what is the purpose of me telling like my mom that, hey, I made Ramadan on your behalf? Like what benefit am I getting by telling her that? Like she might feel happy, like, oh, thank you, I was, I was ill and I was hoping somebody would do it on my behalf. I didn't get the opportunity. But in other situations, like if I'm giving money on their behalf or I'm doing something else, it's not necessary to tell them. I think there are very unique situations where they would really enjoy hearing that. But in general, I think that's something that should be kept private as well. So this awareness is something that's very important and should be part of our daily preparation when we go and when we engage in different types of worship, so that we can change actually how we interact with others, how we interact with family members, how we interact with ourselves. And it really changes a lot of the dynamics in like different relationships that we have. So a lot of the familial problems that we'll have, whether it be with parents or parents with children or husbands and wives, it's kind of reframing some of those relationships and being like, okay, does Allah really want me to talk to this person in this way? It doesn't mean that that relationships needs to be maintained. Maybe when I ask myself, like, does Allah want me to be like this? I'd be like, okay, well, you know what? I might need to redefine this relationship. And that is part of taqwa, right? Part of that taqwa is like, okay, you know what? I need to reset some of my boundaries and I need to redefine these relationships. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's completely reasonable. It's completely fine. Because not every relationship is going to improve. Yes? It will be affected. But that's part of being honest with ourselves. Sometimes we'll have been friends with someone for like a decade, right? And then we realize, like, man, this person's like really toxic. This person's not helping me. This is not helping my deen. What do I do? Yeah. And that person might be like, hey, listen, what's going on? Like, yo, we used to hang out all the time. It's like, listen, man, like I just feel like we're at different places. And where I'm trying to go, I don't feel like that's helping me get to where I want to be. Is it gonna hurt? Yeah. And I think some of it has to do with this. We fear pain, like we fear discomfort, we fear pain, but it's not something that we should be fearing. I'm not saying like go, become a masochist and we start hitting it. No, right? Like we shouldn't hit ourselves. But and I'm not saying we should, quote unquote, enjoy pain, but we have to understand that pain is something that's normal. It's part of our gauge with the world around us, right? So we use happiness, we use sadness, we use anger, we use pain, and sometimes the best way to move forward is really to embrace that pain. A good example that I like using, that even myself, um, when I first moved from like a BMX bike to like a mountain bike, it was kind of big for me. I cut my knee open like pretty bad, like on the chain guard. So it was like literally like a mouth, like a frog mouth. Um, After it got stitched up and it healed, what do you think I did? I got back on the bike. It hurt, right? Like, I still have the scar, but it hurt, but it's okay, right? Guess what? Didn't happen again. I made sure I didn't fall the same way. I made sure I wasn't like looking, weird in weird angles when I was riding. And I'm done. Not to say I didn't fall off the bike again. Like I fell off my bike many times, but I didn't get the same. It wasn't the same type of hurt. And sometimes there are things that are out of our control. But I think understanding that embracing pain is part of growth is something that's very important. And who are the people who received the most pain? I would the Anbiya, right? The prophets and the messengers. They received the most pain during their prophethoods. Yes. Yeah. Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. no doubt, no doubt. Second after, wallahu alam. I don't know. I can't say. Maybe like the ulul azm in general, like so the great prophets. I would say in general, after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Um, but and subhanallah, huh? Maybe Ayyub alayhi salam. You know, there a lot of them. They receive pain in different ways, and the question then becomes, okay, yes, they received a lot of pain, but what was the fruit of it? They were the best of mankind. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with the statement, like pressure creates diamonds, right? And when you want to talk about diamonds amongst human beings, you know, at the top of them is Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no doubt about that. And why? Part of the reason is because he actually went through the most pressure and went through the most difficult. So these things are important to keep in mind. Like we shouldn't seek pain, right? That's not the goal either. We shouldn't go after it. We shouldn't seek it. But if it ever happens, whether it be in a relationship or otherwise, what do? We embrace it and kind of move on. Like I'm sure all of us have lost someone at some point in our lives, right? You know, whether it be someone close, somebody who we love, somebody who we cared for, and those things are normal, right? That thing's healthy. Like I lost my maternal grandmother. It's probably been 15 years or so. Well, guess what? It still hurts, right? But that pain is a part of me, and it's one of the ways I remember her, and that pain reminds me of who she was and like how much I cared for her, how much I loved her. So is pain always a bad thing? No, I don't think so. I think pain can help us remember certain good memories too and good things. The problem is we always associate it with bad, when we have to realize like no, there are painful memories that we look back and we can look back on and have like a happy memory that's associated with it too. So use it like it's part of the tools that Allah has given us, right? So like the happiness, sadness, anger, pain, like these are all tools Allah has given us to help us kind of engage with the world around us. And we have to understand how to use those tools to better our relationships with others and better our relationship with Him Azza wa Jal. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq. Next week, because of Eid, there will be no class. For those of you that don't know, Eid, inshallah, is going to be on Sunday. Saturday is going to be Yom Arafah, so please remember to fast, inshallah. But Eidikum Mubarak, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of your Eid blessed, and I will see you guys in 2 weeks, inshallah. Fast on Arafah, yes, inshallah. May Allah accept. Yeah. Okay. This is a good question. I received this question from a few people. It's like, okay, well, what if Yom Arafah falls on a Saturday? A lot of people, they use a hadith in Sunan Nasa'i where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, don't fast on Saturday, even if you could find like the root of a tree. There's khilaf on the authenticity of this hadith. Number one, that's the first problem. The second one is, even with such a strict wording from him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is still very likely and possible that he intended karaha, that he intended that it's disliked, and it's only disliked if you're doing it for no reason. Like you just like, hey, you know what, I'm going to fast today. Like what if I have a very good reason like Arafah? So I encourage everyone to fast, inshallah. May Allah accept. Subhanakallah, hamdaka wa shalla anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair.